Imagine tomorrow we'd find a letter from Beethoven hidden in a forgotten book somewhere in a dark corner from a gigantic Viennese library. And imagine this letter sent to a distant friend to be about a metronome, and more especially the way we are supposed to use it. Yes, his famously broken metronome that of course functioned just fine. Probably this letter would be scanned in super high resolution and sent in digital format to academic researchers all over the world. And so you would expect to see a modern Beethoven tempo specialist as Dr. Martin Noorduin to soon be all over the news, revealing every detail of that golden letter, finally solving a 2-century-old mystery. Social and non-social media would be overwhelmed with posts on this magical letter and how it would affect our view on the music of the composer of the Ninth Symphony. At least, that's what we would expect to happen. Except, it would not. You think I exaggerate? Think twice, since that document exists. Not hidden in a dark corner of a library, but in front of our eyes. And no, I'm not talking on the second movement of the Eighth Symphony, the so-called metronome parody, though it's related to this. I'm referring to the lesser-known Melzel canon. And don't lean back because our musicologists have brainwashed us so many times, claiming it's an obvious falsification from a certain Anton Schindler. Because I couldn't care less if Schindler's claims are true or not. I grant you that. It's totally irrelevant to this story. But what is relevant, what is absolutely relevant, and what should be written in capitals in all books talking, or at least claiming to talk about historical tempi, is the one sentence in which Schindler explains the joke of the canon. Ever heard of that? I guess not many of you have. This little sentence that I'm about to give you in a minute, in fact, is the only thing you need to cancel all claims that the WBMP, the whole beat metronome practice, has never been mentioned in history. Share this video or this sentence with all musicians you know because it's powerful enough to change the entire musical world on its own. In fact, it is all you need. And so, if you are ready for the uncompromised historical truth, I invite you to lend me 5 more minutes of your time. It will totally change your musical life forever. I give you first a few lines on the history of the Melzel canon, which indeed has the same theme as Beethoven's second movement of his Eighth Symphony. You will now see and understand the true reason why some of our academics have spent so much time and effort to burn the source of this information, Anton Schindler, down to the ground. I recently made an entire episode to factually place Schindler in the context of its time. Link here in the info cards. I will not defend Schindler more than necessary, since I don't need to defend him. Even if he made up the fascinating story of Beethoven's gift to Melzel, the famous canon, since that is what Schindler claims to be true, even then this evidence remains solidly intact. So according to Anton Schindler, Beethoven thought about the theme of this Eighth Symphony on the occasion of Melzel leaving Vienna. It would have been a farewell gift to the famous marketeer of the metronome. Beethoven had habit of writing little canons like this for special occasions, as for instance his former colleague C.P.E. Bach tended to do as well. Let's read the Schindler passage together. I'll picture the original version on screen, which is given in his third version of the Beethoven biography, and read the English translation as given by McArdle and Jolly. Here we go. In the spring of 1812, Beethoven, the mechanic Melzel, Count von Brunswick, Stefan von Breuning, and others were gathered together for a farewell dinner to celebrate first of all Beethoven's journey to see his brother Johann in Linz, where he was to work on his Eighth Symphony before going on to the baths of Bohemia, and secondly Melzel's projected trip to England, where he was to have presented his famous mechanical trumpeter. Beethoven, who in the company of his intimate friends was, as usual, cheerful, witty, satirical, unbuttoned as he called it, improvised at his farewell dinner the following canon, with the guest present joined in singing. And from this canon, the allegretto emerged. The first voice presents note for note the theme of this movement. The words indicate its humorous character, and the metronome marking shows the proper tempo for the allegretto movement. Ta 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 are the pendulum strokes of the metronome. I am indebted to Beethoven himself for having this canon in my possession, since in 1818 he allowed me to copy it. End of quote. You'll notice the fact that Schindler gives a different metronome mark for the canon than Beethoven gave in his 8th Symphony. Beethoven gave 88 to the 8th note, Schindler gives 72 to the same note value. Could it be Beethoven's tempo? Possibly, but again, it's not important to this story. It's interesting, but totally unimportant here. As are the dates and claims for falsification in an article that you'll see on screen, in which you'll only read assumptions for falsification, not completely without any ground, but certainly not with solid proof either. But again, I don't care in the context of this segment, and you shouldn't either, exactly because of this sentence, and I quote, "The metronome markings show the proper tempo for the allegretto movement. Ta 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 are the pendulum strokes of the metronome." This sentence is all you need to understand Beethoven's use of the metronome, or the historical use of the metronome in general. Let's look at the canon again. The ta-ta-tas, set in 16th notes, represent, so we read, the ticks of the metronome. Of course they do, what else could they be? But watch closer. The metronome marking says 8th note 72. But wait a minute, the 16th notes are the ticks, but the metronome mark is given as an 8th note. Aren't we supposed to believe that in the case of this metronome number, the metronome ticks represent the 8 notes and not the 16ths? The great thing about it is that Schindler explains the joke, thereby implicitly exposing the historical use of the metronome. In other words, the correct historical use of the metronome is implied in the explanation of the joke. Schindler is not even touching upon the general use of the metronome, he just applies what was common sense in his days. That makes this so strong. Even if he falsified absolutely everything, this wouldn't make any difference. If Schindler would mention Beethoven to have bought a piece of meat on the local marketplace, we would not doubt the marketplace to have existed. And the same here. And this little sentence confirms in black and white the whole beat metronome practice correct. How many times have I said it? In the 19th century in general, the metronome ticks indicate the subdivision of the note value of the metronome mark. And here you have it. It couldn't be better illustrated than this. And it is rather ironic that it should be this musical joke that Beethoven might or might not have improvised that one evening that brings all the gods of this planet with both feet firmly on the ground again. Musicians in the 19th century played slower than we do today, and they did so by considerable margins. Wouldn't the opposite be more something to seriously wonder about? One thing is sure from this exact moment in history. No one can ever claim again that there has been not a single word published on the WBMP, the whole beat metronome practice. I brought many sources to you, some very direct, some indirectly pointing to the WBMP, but this one sentence of Schindler is as good as a metronome manual directly from the 19th century, directly from within Beethoven's inner circles, if not from Beethoven himself. And it points unambiguously to the whole beat metronome practice. Period. Musicologists who do not acknowledge this as a fact are dishonest to the people they claim to serve. That sounds hard, but that's a fact as well. I have to especially thank a dear friend of mine for getting my attention again on the Melzel canon. Massimiliano Miani, my good Italian friend and wonderful clarinetist, who you'll see this year appear on this channel, asked me for some context around the Melsel canon, and so here we are. Copy this canon on the ceiling above your bed so you can look at it every day to be reminded how the metronome actually was used back in the days. Indeed, each tick indicates the subdivision of the note value of the famous MMs, as we still teach our kids in music school, 1 and 2 and 3. What's more beautiful than simplicity? The more when it can lead us to the lost Beethoven paradise. More info on the WBNP in the video mentioned in the info card and in the description box, where you also find the context around the so-called tactis inequalis, or in other words, the practice of a twofold movement indicating time for ternary time signatures. So that was it for today. Like this video and share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to hit the bell as well so YouTube can notify you for future updates, and become part of this musical movement by becoming an Authentic Sound Insider at patreon.com. You'll find a strong community there, scans of my personal scores, my personal practicing sessions, previews of the YouTube videos, and insight updates as well. Link below and in the description box. Thanks for watching, and see you soon again. Bye.